What input did you get from young people to create the care review?
We heard from thousands of people that have got lots of different experiences of children's social care, and obviously that includes children and young people who've grown up and are still growing up in the care system, but also living with their families and have social work involvement. So the review over the 14 months that it ran spent a lot of time, and I spent a lot of time going and meeting young people, meeting them in foster homes and children's homes, and making sure we ran a whole range of different events to capture their views and experiences.
Why do you think care experience should be a protected characteristic?
Doing the review helped me see, in a way that I hadn't seen before, the massive extent to which young people who've grown up in care face huge challenges to opportunities and to having a fulfilling and happy life. And for us to make sure we support care experienced people, that they have the full potential of their lives met, and because many of them have got incredible stories and incredible skills to bring to the world, we need to make sure that employers, public services, everybody in society plays a much bigger role in supporting care experienced people and making sure we recognise who they are, give them additional support and extra support where that's needed, and that all of us as society hold ourselves to account for saying, are we doing enough for those who've got a care experience?
What do you think the barriers are for young people gaining employment and education?
The specific issues for those who've got a care experience are stability of education, making sure that young people who might end up being moved around the care system, which shouldn't happen, but if it does, making sure that education really sticks with kids so that they don't need to move school, they don't need to have their education disrupted, is really important. Universities doing more to make sure their admissions processes recognise the disadvantage that care experienced people can face, so that they're getting people who've got equal potential but may not have had the chance to show it, and that when care experienced people are at university, that they get the additional support through accommodation and other aspects so that they can thrive in those settings. And the review also talked about apprenticeships and making sure we do more to support apprenticeship routes for care experienced people. In terms of employment, I think that we need to support employers to take on what can be at times a really intensive level of support that care experienced people might need if they're going into the workplace for the first time. And I think there are some great examples of businesses like John Lewis that are trying to do that more and more, and government should be supporting those businesses to go further in making sure that care experienced people can get a job that they're happy with, that's fulfilling, or that they continue down a route of education that's going to help them realise their potential.
How do you think mental health provision should change to support young people living independently?
Mental health provision needs to change in a big way in England. There's long waiting lists for clinical services, and I think earlier on, when young people could be supported through other services like schools or health care settings, there isn't really enough done to build the strong foundations for positive mental health. And I think that what people who maybe haven't had a care experience don't always realise is that when a young person who has been taken away from their family or has had a major change in their family environment and family setting, that can be really isolating. It can give you a sense that you haven't got a clear identity, it's not clear where you belong and where you fit in. And I think sometimes those are the things that drive what we see as very poor mental health outcomes for young people that have grown up in care. And I think those are some of the things that we need to focus on. So how can we build, and this is what the review talked about, how can we build lifelong loving relationships around those who are in the care system so that they're not relying on a system, they've actually instead got a family network, a new family network if they can't continue to live in their old one, and that provides the foundations for strong mental health, positive mental health and well-being. And when young people need really intensive support, that CAMS services, child and adolescent mental health services, are there and available for those who need them the most.
How do you know what care leavers want when you have no care experience yourself?
One of the things I was really keen to do in leading the review was make sure we heard from thousands of people that do have a direct experience, either of care or young people who grew up in their families but had difficulties, but also listening to kinship carers, aunts and uncles and grandparents, foster carers and professionals as well, and of course parents, and trying to bring a lot of those messages together, which often weren't saying the same thing, to try and make sense of how we can change and improve the care system for children ultimately. So I haven't got that experience myself, but a big part of my job in the review was to listen really deeply to those who have and make sure that the recommendations that I concluded with would actually improve the quality of life for those who've grown up in care.
How do you see care experienced young people influencing the wider conversation and care agenda?
I think it's really important that more space is created for those who've got a care experience themselves to actually influence and have some of the power in the system for how we improve things. That's again one of the reasons why I think the care experience should be a protected characteristic. It's one of the reasons for the review, why we had an expert by experience board made up of a lot of people who've got care experience themselves. And I think more services having space for those with direct experience of the services, whether that be young people who've grown up in care or parents who've had to rely on those services, making that the focus means we hold ourselves to account for whether services are actually doing what they're there to do. So I think that's really crucial. I also think we're in a period where maybe there's more public understanding than there has been before about what the care experience involves, and I think more high-profile public voices from artists, from politicians, and from business leaders who themselves have had an experience of care is going to be transformational.
From your report, what is the most important change you think is needed?
Kinship care. We are an unusual country in England compared to other countries around the world in how little we do to support children who might not be in the care system but might be growing up with aunts or uncles or grandparents, because those relatives have stepped in when their parents, their children's parents, can't care for them fully. And those carers are the silent majority of the care system today. And in England, we just don't do anywhere near enough to support either those carers or the children growing up in those kinship arrangements. So I think we could have more children in the future living with their wider family networks rather than necessarily needing to enter the care system. But we can only do that if we provide the level of support and recognition for kinship care and kinship carers that is needed.
Do you think the government have listened to your advice, and do they go far enough?
The government have listened to my advice, and if you look through the recommendations and then what the government are taking forward, I think they have agreed with the direction of changes that are needed, which is really positive. So whether that's changing how we recruit and support foster carers, whether it's how we build new children's homes, changes to the child protection system, support for kinship carers, more intensive early support for families, recognising that much more needs to be done to support the care experienced population to have a good quality of life, good health, housing, and make sure we end homelessness for care experienced people. I think the government's response points in the right direction on a lot of those things. It doesn't go far enough, and whilst we'll take some steps forward in the next 2 years because of the government strategy, which is welcome, we won't go as far as we need to go, or as I think we could go. So we need to keep the pressure up, and we need to make sure that everybody in the system doesn't just look at the government response and go, oh, well, we can't do anything now. Progress will be made, and progress is hard fought for, but we need to positively keep making the case that these changes need to be rolled out at full scale so that we can reset the children's social care system so that it prioritises building the lifelong loving relationships around young people who've got experience of either care or family crisis. And it's only by seeing these changes through, which will take 5, 6, 7 years, only by doing that we will actually successfully change the system.